In 2001, Leslie Preer was murdered in her Maryland home. The case went cold for 23 years. In 2024, thanks to modern genetic genealogy, authorities identified Eugene Gligor as the killer. He was tracked using a familial DNA match and arrested after a covert collection at Dulles Airport. In 2025, Gligor pleaded guilty. The story you're about to read is fictionalized, but rooted in that truth. I didn't know her. Not really. I just knew of her. Mrs. Preer, she was that quiet lady in our neighborhood, always wore slacks, never smiled wide, tended her lawn even in the middle of July like it didn't bother her. I thought she was maybe just another tired adult like most of them, burned out or bitter, whatever. But my friend Taylor knew her. And I swear, if I hadn't gone with him that day, if I hadn't followed him down into that half-finished basement while we were just being dumb kids looking for cool stuff, I would have never gotten tangled up in any of it. I would have never seen what I saw. Would have never had nightmares about that smell. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with how this whole thing actually started. We were 15. Summer had just kicked off. School was out. AC was blasting. We had zero responsibilities except not getting caught doing dumb crap. Taylor and I used to bike everywhere, just wandering. Sometimes we'd go into those half-abandoned parts of the neighborhood, the weird cul-de-sacs where people owned houses but didn't really live in them. You know those houses. Windows closed for years. Lawns dead. Mailbox taped shut. So it didn't seem like a big deal when Taylor said, "Yo, we should check out Mrs. Preer's house. I think it's finally empty." I looked up from my phone. "She dead?" Taylor just shrugged. "I think so. I think my mom said something about a notice on the door, like she died and her family's trying to sell it." It felt wrong, a little, but that kind of wrong where you're more curious than anything. I wasn't going to punk out. We went on a Friday afternoon. Bikes dumped by the curb. No one around. The whole street was weirdly silent, like summer had sucked the life out of it. The house was beige, cracking paint, real normal looking. But the grass was tall, and there were 3 newspapers piled up on the front step. Dead giveaway. We didn't even knock. Taylor pulled out a flathead from his sock. Yeah, a screwdriver. Said he used it for skateboards, which was probably true. But I think he liked having it more for this kind of thing. The door took some nudging, but it creaked open. I remember the smell first, not like dead animal or anything, just stale, thick air, like no one's opened a window in a decade. Inside, it was exactly what I expected, and also not at all. Plastic covers on furniture, stacks of magazines, one of those creepy porcelain angel collections on a dusty shelf. And photos, lots of them, but never of kids. Just her, sometimes her and a cat. I guess she was alone. We didn't talk much, just wandered. You ever walk through someone's house after they're gone? It's like time's paused. There was a sandwich bag still on the counter, expired mayo in the fridge, glasses by the sink, half rinsed. Taylor was heading toward the back hallway. "Basement's this way," he said. I hesitated, because yeah, I was curious. But also, I'd heard things. Back when we were younger, kids whispered about the Preer house, that she talked to herself, that someone once saw her outside in her bathrobe at 3 a.m., that a teenager broke in once and never came back. Urban legends, made-up crap, I figured, but still, something about basements, man. Taylor pulled the door. It groaned. There were wooden steps going down. No light. He flicked the switch. Nothing. Dead power. "Phone flashlight," he said, already heading down. I followed, because what else was I going to do? The stairs creaked bad, real bad. I swear I thought the last 2 would snap. And when I got to the bottom, I immediately hated everything about the space. Concrete floor, water stains, boxes piled chest high, no windows, and cold, like way too cold for June. Taylor wandered off toward the left side, where a table sat covered in yellowed papers and folders. I stayed near the stairs. Something felt off. I looked around. That's when I saw the freezer. Big, old, padlocked shut. I didn't say anything, just stared at it. Taylor noticed. "What's that?" He came over, tried the padlock, rusted. He knelt and used the screwdriver. I told him not to. Actually, I said, "Dude, don't open other people's freezers. That's literally how horror movies start." He smirked. "Exactly why I'm doing it." A few grunts later, the lock snapped. The lid squealed as he pried it open, and then we both stepped back. It was empty, but not clean. There was stuff, stains, dark ones, and a weird white residue in the corners, and that smell, Not fresh, not rotten, just old, tangy, wrong. Taylor covered his nose. Ugh, why would she keep that locked? I didn't answer, because something was clicking in the back of my mind. And then I saw the Polaroid. It was wedged behind the freezer, face down. I pulled it out. It was a photo, blurry, but clearly taken in this very basement. You could see the freezer in the background, and in front of it a guy, shirtless, on the floor. His eyes were closed, or maybe they weren't. Taylor looked over my shoulder. Who's that? I don't know. We didn't say much after that. We just left, didn't steal anything, didn't explore more, just left. And we never told anyone. At least not then. But that Polaroid, I kept it. I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to leave it behind. I hid it under my bed in a box for like 2 weeks. Every time I looked at it, I saw something new. A mark on the guy's shoulder, a pair of boots in the corner, a shadow that didn't make sense. Eventually, I had to say something, so I showed my mom. She went pale, took it to the police. It turned out the photo was real evidence. A forensic detective said it matched the basement and freezer from a cold case back in 2001. A woman named Leslie Preer had been murdered in her own home, beaten, strangled. The killer was never found. Until now, because DNA had been left on the freezer handle. They just never had a match. Until they had the photo. It spiraled from there. Turns out Mrs. Preer had a guest that summer, a guy she met at some conference, Eugene Gligor. Weird dude, traveled a lot, no priors. But once cops got his name again, they ran familial DNA and found a match through one of those ancestry kits people use for fun. They tracked him, waited, got a cup he threw away at the airport. Perfect match. They arrested him in 2024. He confessed, said it was an accident. But that picture? That's what made it real. Without it, they might have never reopened the file. And if we hadn't gone into that basement, I still think about the freezer, about that guy in the photo. He wasn't the killer. He was another victim. But he was never reported missing. They're still figuring out who he was. Maybe someone no one ever looked for. Maybe just a ghost in a Polaroid. We don't go into empty houses anymore. And Taylor, he doesn't like talking about it. Says the freezer still shows up in his dreams. They never figured out who the man in the Polaroid was. I'm just telling you that now, because I know that's the part that'll haunt you too. But let me back up, because after we turned that photo in, everything went fast. Faster than I expected. We didn't get in trouble for breaking in, which I honestly thought we would. But my mom had gone straight to the cops, and I think once they saw the photo, they stopped caring how we got it. We gave statements. Cops came by the house, sat me down in my kitchen with a recorder on the table. They asked about the freezer, what it looked like, how the padlock broke. They asked if I'd touched anything else. I told them no, which was mostly true. They didn't tell me much, just that the house had been the site of an open investigation, that they were calling in forensic teams, that we did the right thing. Still didn't sleep that night. Neither did Taylor. 2 weeks later, I got pulled out of class. Not in trouble, just asked to come to the principal's office. There were 2 people waiting, not cops, FBI. That's when it hit me how deep this thing went. They showed me a printed photo, one I'd never seen before, the same basement, the same freezer, but this time it had yellow tape on the lid and black fingerprint dust smudged all over the handle. I knew what that meant. They'd found something. Your fingerprints were on the inside of the freezer, one of them said. My stomach dropped. I opened it, I admitted. I told the other cops that. I didn't touch anything else. The woman nodded. She had this way of looking at me that felt like she'd already read everything I'd ever posted online. We're not here to scare you, she said. We just need to ask a few questions. That Polaroid, that's what changed everything. They told me what the local PD hadn't. The murder of Leslie Preer had gone cold in 2001. She'd been found dead in that very basement, bruising around her neck, signs of a struggle. One neighbor said she'd mentioned a man visiting from out of state, but no one knew his name. She'd met him at a museum function. That's all they had, until now. The photo gave them a face, not the killer's, but another piece of the puzzle. Because in the background of the Polaroid, behind the man on the floor, there was a pair of boots. Men's boots, army surplus type, and they matched the ones listed in the evidence log from 2001. They'd been collected, bagged, and stored, with DNA on the laces, but it never matched anyone until it did. Here's where it gets crazy. So you know those websites where people spit in a tube to find out they're 12% Viking or whatever? Yeah, turns out the killer's cousin did one. And that flagged the system. A genealogist built out a family tree, narrowed it down, and found a man named Eugene Gliger. Lived in New York, traveled a lot, no criminal record, but the timeline fit, and more than that, he'd been to Maryland that summer. Records showed he rented a car from Dulles Airport in July 2001. They tracked him, waited for him to travel again, and when he did, they followed him to the airport, to the Starbucks near gate B15. He ordered a coffee, tossed the cup in the bin, they grabbed it, ran the DNA, and it matched perfectly. He was arrested in late 2024, tried to deny it at first, said he didn't know anyone named Prier, said he hadn't been to Maryland, but they had receipts, literally, car rental records, phone pings, travelogues, and finally, he broke. He confessed, said they argued, that it got out of hand, that he didn't mean to kill her, that after it happened, he panicked, tried to clean it up, dragged her body down to the basement freezer, but then he got scared and ran, left her there, locked it up. He never came back, but there was something he didn't confess to. The man in the photo. When asked, he said, "I don't know what you're talking about. There was no one else there." But the Polaroid didn't lie. There was someone else, face down, shirtless, on the floor, not moving. And here's the thing, when they searched the house in 2001, they didn't open the freezer. The power had been off, it was sealed, and nobody thought to crack it. She was found in the laundry room, not the freezer, which means that man in the photo, he might still be in there, or might have been. We'll never know. They tested the freezer again in 2025, scraped the corners, ran tests, but after 20-plus years and no working cold source, the DNA had degraded. They couldn't prove a second body had ever been in it, couldn't disprove it either. But the Polaroid, my photo, was dated. You could see the timestamp, August 6th, 2001. That was after Leslie died, meaning that man came later. Or maybe he was already there. I didn't tell Taylor about all of this, not at first. He didn't want to know. Said he burned his shoes, said he kept smelling the basement on them. We drifted after that. Still talk now and then, but we don't bring up the house. It sat unsold for months. No one wanted it. Even after the cleanup, the place felt wrong. People said lights flickered at night, that a cat kept scratching at the boarded-up door, that sometimes you could hear footsteps when no one was inside. Could be rumors, could be true. I wouldn't go near it again to find out. In the end, Eugene Gliger pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He didn't go to trial, didn't give the family much peace, just admitted it, took a deal. Got life without parole. And still, no one knows who the man in the Polaroid was. Sometimes I stare at the picture, the one I found behind the freezer, and every time it feels like he's just about to open his eyes. True case basis. This story is based on the real-life murder of Leslie Prier, whose 2001 death went unsolved for over 2 decades. In 2024, investigators identified Eugene Gliger using genetic genealogy. He was arrested after DNA matched to a relative through an ancestry database. Gliger pleaded guilty in 2025. While this fictionalized account includes a mysterious extra detail, the man in the Polaroid, everything related to the investigation, arrest, and confession is rooted in public record. Call to action. Some cold cases get solved because of others, because someone spoke up. If you see something, say something. You never know what might be the missing piece. Subscribe to Curell Case Files for more real stories that were almost forgotten. Weekly drops. Share this episode if it gave you chills. And remember, the past doesn't stay buried forever. Sometimes, it just needs someone dumb enough to open the freezer.